My name is Arthur Price, and for the better part of the last 18 months, I have been an employee of the Subway franchise, located just off Interstate 35, a few miles north of a small, largely unremarkable town in central Texas. My official designation is sandwich artist, though the artistry involved is often debatable, particularly during the graveyard shift, which I have exclusively worked since my hiring. The hours, from 10 in the evening until 6 in the morning, are not for everyone, but they offered a modicum of solitude and, more importantly, a consistent paycheck, which, for a man in my modest circumstances, was not to be undervalued. The establishment itself is standard for the brightly lit, if somewhat sterile, counter displaying an array of vegetables, meats, and cheeses, all meticulously arranged according to corporate guidelines. Behind this, the ovens, the bread cabinets, and the walk-in refrigerator and freezer. To the front, a small dining area with half a dozen tables, rarely occupied during my tenure. The glow of the open sign casts a lonely beacon into the vast, inky blackness of the Texas night, punctuated only by the fleeting headlights of passing 18-wheelers, their drivers either too pressed for time or too road wary to consider stopping for a footlong. My duties are, as one might expect, routine. I prepare the store for the night, ensuring all ingredients are stocked, surfaces are sanitized, and the cash register contains the correct float. Then I wait. The flow of customers after midnight is usually a trickle, often consisting of late night travelers, shift workers from nearby industrial parks, or the occasional local who's developed a nocturnal craving for a spicy Italian. I make their sandwiches, process their payments, wish them a good night, and return to the quiet hum of the refrigeration units and the low thrum of the highway. For the first year or so, the nights were unremarkable, differentiated only by the weather, or the occasional odd customer, nothing beyond the pale of what one might expect working a late shift at a roadside fast food joint. There was the man who insisted on paying for his meatball, marinara entirely in nickels, the woman who tried to order a ski, blue Gatorade, we only had blued, or the group of teenagers who thought it hilarious to try and stuff a live armadillo into the chip rack. Annoying, certainly, but not unsettling. The change began subtly. So subtly, in fact, that I initially dismissed it as a product of a fatigue or an overactive imagination fostered by too many hours spent in near total isolation. It started with the bread. We bake it fresh throughout the day, and any loaves left unsold by closing are typically discarded, or, if I'm feeling peckish, consumed by yours truly. One morning, as I was preparing for the day shift manager to arrive, I noticed a loaf of Italian herbs and cheese, perfectly baked, sitting on the cooling rack. I distinctly remembered throwing out all the leftover bread from the previous evening. There were no late orders that would have required baking a fresh batch. I shrugged it off. Perhaps I'd misremembered. The mind plays tricks when you're chronically sleep-deprived. A few nights later, it was the cookies. We keep them in a display case, usually a dozen of each variety. I'd sold a few chocolate chip cookies to a trucker around 2 a.m. When I did my pre-dawn inventory check, the chocolate chip tray was full again, each cookie perfectly round, looking like they'd just been pulled from the oven. I hadn't baked any. I checked the security camera footage, a grainy black and white feed that covered the counter and a portion of the dining area. The timestamp showed me selling the cookies, then nothing but me wiping down counters and mopping the floor for the next 3 hours. No one else had entered the store. No one else was in the store. A prickle of unease traced its way down my spine. This wasn't just misremembering. This was tangible. I started keeping a small notebook, jotting down these little discrepancies. A bottle of mustard, found uncapped and standing upright on the slicer, when I was certain I'd put it away. The faint sound of whistling, a jaunty little tune I didn't recognize, seeming to come from the back storeroom, only to cease the moment I went to investigate. The walk-in freezer door, which I always triple-checked was securely latched, found slightly ajar on more than one occasion. A plume of icy mist, billowing out into the warmer air of the kitchen. I considered speaking to my manager, a perpetually stressed woman named Brenda, but what would I say? Brenda, I think our store is being visited by a ghost who likes to bake and occasionally leaves the freezer open. I'd be laughed out of the county, or worse, sent for a psychiatric evaluation. So I kept my counsel, my little notebook filling with increasingly bizarre entries. The first truly disturbing incident occurred about 3 months into this pattern. It was a Tuesday, or technically Wednesday morning, around 3:15 a.m. The highway outside was dead silent, not even the distant rumble of a truck to break the oppressive quiet. I was in the back, restocking the chip display, when I heard the bell above the front door jingle. Standard procedure is to greet the customer immediately. "Be right with you," I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. I dropped the box of salt and vinegar chips and hurried to the front. There was no one there. The door was closed. The dining area was empty. I stepped outside, the humid Texas air clinging to me like a shroud. The parking lot was deserted, bathed in the sickly orange glow of the streetlights. Nothing. Not a car, not a person, not even a stray dog. "Hello," I called out, feeling a fool. My voice was swallowed by the darkness. I went back inside, a knot tightening in my stomach. The bell couldn't have rung on its own. It was an old-fashioned bell, requiring a decent push on the door to activate. I checked the security footage again. This time, what I saw made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The footage showed the door opening. Just opening, as if an invisible hand had pushed it. It swung inward. The bell jingled merrily, and then after a few seconds, it swung shut again with a soft click. No one entered. No one exited. I replayed it, over and over, the door opening by itself. That was the point I moved from, "This is a bit weird," to, "Something is terribly wrong here." I started to dread my shifts. The solitude I once cherished now felt menacing. Every creak of the building, every flicker of the fluorescent lights, every distant sound from the highway made me jump. The strange occurrences didn't stop with the phantom customer. If anything, They escalated, becoming more personal, more directed. One night, I was slicing tomatoes, the rhythmic thud of the knife on the cutting board, a small comfort in the silence. I finished, washed the knife and board, and turned to put them away. When I turned back to the prep counter, there was a single, perfectly ripe tomato, sitting where I had just been working, a small, almost surgical incision in its side, oozing juice like a wound. I hadn't left it there. I would have remembered. Another time, I was mopping the floor, starting from the back and working my way to the front. I'd just finished the area around the drink fountain when I heard a soft squelching sound behind me. I turned. A single, wet, footprint too large to be mine was imprinted on the freshly mopped tiles near the back door. It was facing away from the door, as if someone had walked out of the wall itself. It was gone a moment later, evaporated into the tile, but the image was seared into my mind. I began to feel watched. It was a constant, oppressive sensation, like unseen eyes boring into my back. Sometimes, I'd catch a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow darting just out of sight. I'd whip my head around, heart pounding, only to find nothing. The store would be silent, empty, mocking me with its mundane appearance. The most unnerving thing, however, started happening with the radio. We have a small, cheap radio in the back office that I usually keep tuned to a classic rock station for company. It's prone to static, especially during storms. One night, during particularly quiet spell, the music faded out, replaced by a burst of static. Then, a voice. It was low, guttural, and seemed to be speaking in a language I didn't recognize, though a few words sounded vaguely like distorted Latin. It lasted only a few seconds before the rock music blared back on. I told myself it was interference, a stray signal from Mexico, perhaps. But it happened again a few nights later, and then again. Each time, the voice was the same, and each time, a cold dread washed over me. It didn't sound human. I started to lose sleep, even during the day. My small apartment felt less like a sanctuary and more like a temporary reprieve before. I had to return to that place. I thought about quitting, finding another job, any job. But a part of me, a stubborn, perhaps foolish part, wanted to understand. What was happening at this subway? And why did it seem to be focused on me? The culmination of this early phase of strangeness, the event that solidified my fear into something more akin to terror, happened last week. I was in the walk-in refrigerator, checking dates on the cold cuts. The heavy door clicked shut behind me, as it always did. It's an old unit, and the internal release handle was notoriously unreliable. Brenda had been meaning to get it fixed for months. However, I usually propped it open with a milk crate if I was going to be in there for more than a minute. But I'd forgotten this time. I finished my task and reached for the handle. It wouldn't budge. I pushed harder. Nothing. A wave of claustrophobia, cold and sharp, washed over me. "Okay, Arthur, don't panic," I muttered to myself, my breath misting in the frigid air. I tried again, jiggling it, pulling, pushing. Stuck fast. Then I heard it. A soft scratching sound from the other side of the door. Scratch, scratch. Pause. Scratch. My blood ran cold. Hello. I called out, my voice trembling. Is anyone out there? The doors stuck. The scratching stopped. For a moment, there was only the hum of the refrigerator fans. Then, a low chuckle. It was a dry, rasping sound, like dead leaves skittering across concrete. It was right on the other side of the door. I hammered on the door. Let me out. This isn't funny. The chuckling continued, growing louder, more malicious. And then, a voice, the same guttural voice from the radio, whispered, so close I felt like its breath could have frosted the metal. Not yet. Arthur. Terror, stark and absolute, seized me. My fists beat against the unyielding metal of the refrigerator door, the sound swallowed by the insulated walls. Who are you? What do you want? I screamed, my voice cracking. A pathetic tremor against the chilling amusement that seemed to radiate from the other side. The only response was that dry, rasping chuckle, closer now, as if the speaker had pressed its ear, or whatever passed for an ear, against the door. Patience, Arthur. We're just getting acquainted. Panic lent me a desperate strength. I threw my shoulder against the door, again and again, grunting with the effort, the cold air burning my lungs. It was no use. The latch, or whatever held it, was beyond my ability to force. I slumped against the wire shelves, surrounded by boxes of frozen patties and tubs of pre-sliced vegetables, the cold seeping into my bones, a chilling mirror to the fear that gripped my heart. How long would I be in here? The temperature was easily below freezing. Hypothermia was a very real, very immediate threat. I don't know how long I remained huddled there, a mixture of terror and despair washing over me. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The scratching returned, intermittent and deliberate, like something idly sharpening its claws. Each scrape sent a fresh jolt of fear through me. I tried to reason, to bargain. Please, just let me out. I won't tell anyone. I'll quit, I'll leave town. Just let me go. Silence. Then, a new sound. A faint, almost melodic humming. It was a discordant tune, unsettling and wrong, yet with a strange, hypnotic quality. It seemed to vibrate through the very structure of the refrigerator, through the floor, into my body. My teeth began to chatter, not just from a cold, but from a primal, bone, deep dread. Just as I felt my consciousness starting to fray, the edges of my vision blurring, a loud clang echoed from the door. The humming stopped. The scratching ceased. I held my breath, listening. Another clang, followed by the distinct sound of the latch mechanism disengaging. The door creaked open a few inches. I scrambled towards it, hope surging through me, so potent, it almost made me dizzy. I pushed the door wide and stumbled out into the relative warmth of the kitchen, gasping for air, my limbs stiff and aching. The kitchen was empty. The back door was closed and locked. The radio in the office was silent. It was as if nothing had happened. Had I imagined it? The cold, the voice, the scratching. But the bone-chilling cold still clung to me, and my throat was raw from screaming. My knuckles were bruised from pounding on the door. This was no dream. I checked the time. Nearly 4:30 a.m. I had been in that refrigerator for almost an hour. An hour of sheer, unadulterated terror. Who or what had let me out, and why. Shaken to my core, I barely managed to function for the remainder of my shift. Every shadow seemed to lengthen, every noise made me jump. When Brenda, the day manager, arrived at 5:45 a.m., she took one look at my pale-faced and trembling hands and asked if I was all right. "Fine, Brenda. Just a long night," I managed, forcing a weak smile. I couldn't bring myself to tell her. She already thought I was a bit odd for preferring the night shift, confessing that I believed the store was haunted by a malevolent, Latin, murmuring entity that locked employees in freezers would likely earn me a one-way ticket to early retirement or a padded room. I went home that morning, the rising sun doing little to dispel the icy dread that had settled deep within me. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the inside of that refrigerator, heard that rasping chuckle, that guttural whisper. "Not yet, Arthur." The encounters, after the refrigerator incident, took on a more overtly threatening quality. It was no longer just about misplaced items or phantom sounds. It felt like whatever haunted that subway was actively trying to break me. One night, I was making a sandwich for one of the few late-night regulars, a trucker named Earl, who always ordered a foot-long turkey on wheat, extra mayo. As I was spreading the mayonnaise, my hand suddenly jerked, as if guided by an unseen force. The plastic knife slashed across the back of my other hand, drawing a thin line of blood. It wasn't a deep cut, but it was precise, deliberate. Earl, oblivious, was scrolling through his phone. I quickly wrapped a paper towel around my hand, my heart hammering. I'd been making sandwiches for 18 months. My hands were steady, practiced. I didn't just slip. The security cameras became a source of both validation and increased horror. I started reviewing the footage obsessively at the end of each shift. I saw myself reacting to things that weren't visible on camera, whipping my head around, staring at empty spaces. But then, I'd catch it. A fleeting shadow in the corner of the frame, too quick to be a trick of the light. The bread knives on their magnetic rack, rattling violently for a second, with no discernible cause. The reflection in the glass of the cold display showing a distorted, elongated shape standing behind me. A shape that vanished when I turned. The voice from the radio became more frequent. It would cut in randomly, sometimes for a few seconds, sometimes for a minute or more. The language remained unintelligible, but the tone was always the same. Menacing, mocking, filled with a cold, ancient hatred. I tried unplugging the radio, but the voice would then emanate from other sources, the hum of the ovens, the hiss of the soda fountain, even, terrifyingly, from the speaker of my own cell phone when it was turned off. I started talking to it. I know it sounds insane, but the silence, the not knowing, was worse. "What do you want from me?" I'd whisper into the empty store, my voice hoarse. "Why are you doing this?" Sometimes, there would be no answer. Other times, a cold spot would develop in the room, the temperature plummeting suddenly, or objects would move. A stack of napkins would fly off the counter. The wet floor. Sign would slide across the tiles as if kicked. One night, it answered. I had just asked, Who are you?" The lights in the entire store flickered violently, then went out, plunging me into absolute darkness. The emergency lights, battery, powered, failed to kick in. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking too much to activate the flashlight. Then, the voice, no longer from a specific source, but all around me, as if the air itself was speaking. It was a chorus of whispers, layered and sibilant. Where are the spaces between? The hunger that gnaws. The shadow in the corner of your eye. A single ice, cold touch brushed my cheek. I cried out, stumbling backward, crashing into a stack of bread trays. The lights flickered back on, blindingly bright. I was alone. The store silent once more, save for my own ragged breathing. I was losing my grip. The lack of sleep, the constant fear, the sheer impossibility of it all was wearing me down. I looked gaunt, my eyes bloodshot and haunted. Brenda started giving me concerned looks, asking if I needed to take some time off. I knew I should, but the thought of leaving, of not knowing what this thing was or what it wanted, was almost as terrifying as staying. And a darker thought began to take root. What if it wasn't tied to the subway? What if it was tied to me? What if leaving wouldn't make it stop? The notebook I kept became my only confidant. Its pages were filled with frantic scribbles, accounts of each incident, attempts to find a pattern, a meaning. I researched local history, looking for any tragedies, any dark events associated with the land the subway was built on. I found nothing out of the ordinary, just acres of Texas scrubland before the highway came through. The entity, or entities, seemed to enjoy toying with the food. One morning, I found all the pickles arranged in a perfect spiral on the floor of the walk-in. Another time, every single olive had been meticulously removed from the olive container and placed into the jalapeno container, and vice versa, without a drop of brine spilled. These acts were bizarre, almost childish, yet performed with an unnerving precision that spoke of an alien intelligence. The most visually disturbing incident involved the meat slicer. I rarely used it during the night shift, as most meats were pre-sliced. But one morning, as I was doing my final checks, I found it running. The blade was a silver blur, and on the carriage, where a roast or a log of salami would normally sit, was a single, perfect, red rose. Its petals were unblemished, its stem neatly cut. As I watched, transfixed, the carriage moved forward, and the blade sliced cleanly through the stem, the flower head tumbling onto the stainless steel surface below. Then, the machine switched off. There was no rose in the store. I hadn't brought one. No customer could have left it. I was standing there, staring at the bisected flower, when I heard a new sound. It wasn't the guttural voice, nor the sibilant whispers. It was a child's laughter. Clear, innocent, and utterly out of place. It seemed to be coming from the dining area. My heart hammered against my ribs. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed open the kitchen door and peered out. The dining area was dim, lit only by the pre-dawn light filtering through the windows and the faint glow of the open. Sitting at one of the tables, her back to me, was a little girl. She had long, dark hair and was wearing a simple white dress. She was humming softly to herself, A children's nursery rhyme, and gently rocking back and forth. A child. Here, at this hour, it was impossible. No parent in their right mind would let a little girl wander into a subway alone before dawn. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the innocent image before me with the relentless, malevolent presence that had tormented me for months. Was this another trick? A new form of psychological warfare? My hand instinctively went to the handle of the bread knife. I still kept tucked into my apron, a habit I developed more for reassurance than any real expectation of using it. "Hello," I called out softly, my voice barely a whisper. "Little girl, are you lost?" The humming stopped. The rocking ceased. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the girl turned her head. The first thing I noticed was her eyes. They were wide, unnervingly so, and a pale, milky blue. Like frosted glass, they seemed to absorb the dim light rather than reflect it. There were no pupils. Just those flat, empty orbs. A small, almost polite smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Those remained fixed on me, cold and appraising. "I'm not lost," she said, her voice as clear and sooth as a wind chime, yet with an underlying resonance that sent a shiver down my spine. It was too mature, too self-possessed for a child her apparent age. "Ere you, Arthur?" Hearing my name on her lips, spoken with such calm familiarity, was like a physical blow. How could she know my name? I hadn't said it. My name tag was obscured by my apron. How do you know my name?" I stammered, taking a hesitant step into the dining area. The air around her felt unnaturally cold, a pocket of winter in the humid Texas morning. Her smile widened, and it was no longer polite. It was knowing, predatory. "Oh, we know all about you, Arthur. We've been watching you. We like watching you." The why sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. So, she was connected to the voice, the shadows, the scratching. "What are you?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to keep it steady. "What do you want?" The girl giggled, a sound that should have been innocent, but was instead deeply unsettling, like the tinkle of broken glass. "Want? We want to play, Arthur. We've been so bored." She patted the seat next to her. "Come sit with me. Let's play a game." My feet felt rooted to the floor. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of that store, to never look back. But a horrifying fascination, a morbid curiosity, held me captive, and the chilling certainty that running wouldn't help. They could find me. I don't think I want to play your game," I said. Her expression soared instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by a petulant frown. The temperature in the room seemed dropped several more degrees. "That's not very nice, Arthur. We don't like it when people are not nice." Her voice lost its childish lilt, taking on a harsher, grating quality that ate the guttural tones I'd heard from the radio. Behind her, through the large front windows, I saw the first hint of dawn painting the eastern sky in shades of bruised purple and blood orange. Hope flickered. Daylight. Surely, these things couldn't exist in the light of day. "It's almost morning," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "You should probably go." The girl threw her head back and laughed, a sound that was no longer human. It was a cacophony of whispers, growls, and that dry, rasping chuckle, all emanating from that small, childlike form. Her image flickered, like a bad television signal, and for a horrifying instant, I saw not a little girl, but something else, something tall and gaunt, with eyes like burning coals and a mouth full of needle-sharp teeth. Then, she was a little girl again, pouting. "The sun means nothing to us, Arthur," she hissed, her voice now a chorus of the entities I had come to dread. "We are eternal. We were here before this tin can was built. We will be here long after it has rusted into dust." She stood up, her small white dress swirling around her ankles. She was still a child in form, but the aura of ancient, malevolent power radiating from her was overwhelming. "You've been a fun toy, Arthur. But toys eventually break." She took a step towards me, and I stumbled back, my hand fumbling for the bread knife. It felt pitifully inadequate. "What are you going to do with that, Arthur?" They sneered. "Make us a sandwich." Suddenly, the front door of a subway burst open with a violent crash, the bell jangling frantically. Standing framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the growing light, was Earl, the trucker. He held a tire iron in his hand, his face grim. "Heard some strange noises coming from in here, Artie," he said, his voice a welcome, normal sound in the madness. "Figured I'd check it out. Everything all right?" He hadn't seen the girl yet, who was partially obscured by a display of chips. The girl turned, her milky eyes fixing on Earl. A look of pure, unadulterated fury twisted her small features. "Interloper!" she shrieked, her voice splitting into a dozen discordant screeches. The lights in the store exploded in a shower of sparks. The chip racks flew across the room. The menu boards behind the counter crashed to the floor. A wave of icy wind swept through the store, extinguishing the open sign with a pop. Earl, to his credit, didn't flinch. He just raised the tire iron. "Get behind me, Artie!" I didn't need telling twice. I scrambled behind his burly form, my eyes still locked on the monstrous child. She was changing, her form elongating, her limbs becoming spindly and insect-like, her white dress tearing as her body warped and twisted. The air crackled with an unseen energy. "You cannot stop us!" the creature shrieked, its voice a demonic roar. It lunged, not at Earl, but at me. Earl swung the tire iron. There was a sickening thud, like hitting a side of beef, followed by an unearthly screech of pain and rage. The creature recoiled, its form flickering wildly. For a moment, I saw a vortex of shadows, swirling and chaotic, before it coalesced back into the shape of the little girl, now with a dark, viscous fluid oozing from a gash on her arm. She glared at Earl, her milky eyes burning with hatred. Then, she looked at me, and her lips curled into that awful, knowing smile. "This isn't over, Arthur. We'll find you. We always find our toys." And then, as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. One moment she was there, radiating malice. The next, there was only empty space. The wind died down. The flying debris settled. The only sounds were my ragged breathing and Earl's heavy panting. The sun was fully up now, its golden rays streaming through the shattered front door, illuminating the wrecked interior of the subway. It looked like a tornado had torn through it. Earl lowered the tire iron, his face pale but resolute. What in the Sam Hill was that? Artie. I had no answer. I could only stare at the spot where the girl had stood, the lingering cold a testament to her presence. Brenda arrived to a scene of utter devastation. To her credit, after Earl and I stammered out a heavily edited version of events, a freak-localized whirlwind, perhaps, or a particularly violent gang of vandals, she simply sighed, ran a hand through her already messy hair, and called the insurance company. I quit that day. I couldn't spend another night in that place. I didn't even bother collecting my last paycheck. I packed a bag, got in my old pickup, and drove. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get as far away from that subway from that town as possible. It's been 6 months since that night. I'm hundreds of miles away, working a dead-end construction job in a different state. I try not to think about what happened. I try to tell myself it was a hallucination, a product of stress and sleep deprivation. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my cheap motel room, I hear it. Faint scratching at the door. The low, guttural whisper of a voice speaking a language I don't understand. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a fleeting glimpse of a little girl in a white dress out of the corner of my eye, her milky blue eyes fixed on me, a knowing smile on her lips. They said they'd find me, and I think, deep down, I know they will. Because some things, once they've found you, never truly let go. And I fear, with a certainty that chills me to the bone, that I am, and always will be, their toy.